NewsX World. We start this hour in the Middle East, where Hamas says its delegation has wrapped up a visit to Egypt, aimed at ending the war in Gaza and Israeli actions in the West Bank. In a statement, the group said the trip was meant to build consensus with Palestinian factions and draft what it called a national roadmap. Hamas claimed the visit came amid what it described as Zionist plans to reoccupy Gaza City and continue what it called genocide against Palestinians. The group said factions agreed to keep working to the end of the war, support civilians in Gaza, and confront challenges in Jerusalem and the West Bank. Okay, we're now joined by Professor Ephraim Imbar. He is a senior researcher at the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security to discuss this in further detail. Professor Imbar, thank you very much for joining us here on the program. Do you have any hopes that there could be some movement from this Hamas delegation that has visited Egypt? We'll talk about the language it is used in a second, but what are your thoughts on the state, the stance of Hamas right now, and is it anything that Israel can negotiate with?
So far, Hamas is adamant to keep its weapons. It said so that it will keep its weapons until a Palestinian state will be established. And as long as Hamas is in Gaza and it holds to its weapons, I don't think that there is a possibility of reaching an agreement. Hamas must obey the international community will to leave Gaza and to allow the Gazans to be free and prosper, rather to be subjugated by a tyrannical, fanatical, religious, Islamic group. And as long as Hamas has a hope that the international community will pity the Palestinians, that Hamas is ready to sacrifice in great numbers, they will not budge. They will not move from their position. We shouldn't forget that they are fanatics and they are very stubborn. That's the nature of the beast we are facing.
Professor Imbar, you've mentioned there the states that are prepared to recognize a Palestinian state at the UNGA at the end of this month, the likes of the United Kingdom, the likes of France, the likes of Australia, and other traditional allies of Israel are saying that they're going to recognize a Palestinian state if there is no ceasefire by that event. However, also what they have mentioned is that Hamas can play no role in the government of Gaza or anywhere else in the Palestinian state for that matter. What are your thoughts, and when, if that does happen, what are going to be the immediate consequences, in your opinion, and the long-term ones?
I think that those countries that are willing to recognize a Palestinian state, which doesn't exist, is a misguided step. Basically, it rewards the terrorists, it rewards the Palestinian Authority and the Palestinian people that support Hamas. And it doesn't affect the situation on ground. Basically, the Palestinian political body is afflicted with a terrible disease, political disease. They have no ability to create monopoly over use of force, which is a basic requirement of a state. And we see it, of course, in the Palestinian Authority, where there are the Palestinian police as well as their militias. And this is true, of course, also of Gaza, where we see Hamas and another Islamic organization like Islamic Jihad, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and there are clans with weapons. And as long as the Palestinians will not be able to put their act together and create conditions for orderly rule in their territory, they will not have a state, simply. It has nothing to do with Israel. What's happening in Syria, what's happening in Iraq, what's happening in Yemen, in Libya, all those entities have no monopoly over use of force.
Okay.
It's nothing to do with Israel.
Professor Ivenbrough, I'm just conscious of time. Hamas has used strong language expectedly when coming to these talks. It has claimed the visit. He described the Zionist plans to reoccupy Gaza, a claim which Benjamin Netanyahu denies that it is Israel's end goal to do so. However, Benjamin Netanyahu has contradicting statements when it comes to his English press conferences, which he gave the world just a couple of weeks back, when he said that it is Israel's aim to set up a government in the enclave, that it is separate from Hamas and the PLO, etc. However, his statements have said that he feels connected to Greater Israel, which includes, of course, the Gaza Strip. And also, of course, we can't forget the Israeli plans to extend settlements inside the West Bank. When Israel says these things yet acts differently, what are your thoughts in the true nature?
I think that Israel obviously makes all the signals and all the noises that it intends to conquer Gaza in order to defeat Hamas and to free the hostages. This is what's happening nowadays. And Israel indeed intensified air attacks on Gaza, destroying high-rise buildings that can be used by the terrorists as observation points to identify where the Israelis are coming. And this is, unless there is something unexpected and we see a change in Hamas position, this will probably happen. The West Bank is a different story. The West Bank is where the Palestinian Authority is ruling, and as I mentioned before, they are very bad at ruling. They also pay from their national budget for terrorists and their families, and they are not seen as a serious partner of becoming good neighbors at the future stage. So unfortunately, our neighbors are not very nice, and we can't do much about it, but just to limit their capabilities to harm us.
Your input on the program. We now move on and out and into Europe, where British police have arrested nearly 900 people in London during a pro-Palestine action demonstration in London, marking the largest mass detention linked to the banned group. Palestine Action was outlawed in July after members damaged military planes at a Royal Air Force base. Police said most detainees were held for showing support for the prescribed group, while 17 were arrested for assaulting officers during violent clashes. Among those arrested were priests, veterans and healthcare workers. Human rights groups have criticised the ban as heavy-handed, while the government defends it as a necessary action to maintain public order. We are now joined by Keith Vaz. He is a former UK minister and he joins us live from London. Keith, as always, a pleasure to speak to you. Keith, you speaking to us from London. Of course, this has been huge in the news in the United Kingdom. Images of people holding placards of all ages, of all professions, and being arrested and taken away by the police for holding up the statement, "I support Palestine Action." How do you think this could develop? Of course, even sometimes the police seem opposed to and reluctant to arrest these people. What are your thoughts on this?
Good afternoon, Thomas. Look, the situation is getting out of control here. 900 arrests is a vast number of people. I think it must be one of the largest numbers ever arrested at a demonstration in the UK. And the point of this is they have to be processed. They have to be taken through the necessary process once you've been arrested. And action is either going to be taken or it's going to be, they're not going to proceed. But in any event, it takes up an absolutely huge amount of police time, one that is very serious and very difficult to deal with. And I think most members of the public would feel that there is something better for the police to do than to arrest those people who will go on a march of this kind. As we know, there is a court hearing that is due to take place later on this year about the whole issue of the ban on Palestine action. And we have the bizarre circumstances the last time this happened, where someone who was blind, who was wearing a Palestine action T-shirt, was subsequently arrested by the police. I think that it puts the police in a very difficult position. I'm not blaming the police. They didn't decide on this law. This law was thrust upon them, but they have to administer it. And it makes it extremely difficult. What if you have another demonstration with even more people turning up? It's going to make it very difficult for the police to get on with their other job when they're spending all their time arresting people for going on demonstrations. So, I think there has to be a line in the sand on this, and maybe the new Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, would want to review carefully what was decided by her predecessor as to whether or not we should actually have this law in this way, and perhaps a better justification for doing what they are doing. But these are, these are getting to be situations that are completely out of control.
Yes, indeed, Keith. Do stay with us as we go over to the European continent and over to France, where on the eve of a no-confidence vote that could topple his government, French Prime Minister Francois Bayrou has warned that local political forces, long divided in the National Assembly, are now united in seeking his removal. The vote comes after months of political deadlock that followed French President Emmanuel Macron's snap parliamentary election in 2024, which left France with a fractured assembly and the far-right National Rally as the largest party. Macron's alliance, already without a majority since 2022, has struggled to pass legislation amid rising public debt, which has reached 113.9% of GDP. Bayrou, Macron's fourth prime minister since his re-election, attempted to push through a 2026 budget aiming to save 44 billion euros through pension freezes, healthcare cuts and the scrapping of public holidays. The plan sparked strong opposition, and Bayrou ultimately called a confidence vote on his fiscal strategy. Opponents have dismissed it as a gamble and have reportedly made clear that they would vote him out. Let's take a listen in to what the French Prime Minister had to say.
L'idée que toutes les formations politiques ont dit que elles allaient abattre le gouvernement.
Elles l'ont dit.
Toutes.
Si on se fie à ce qui est dit, c'est fini.
En dehors des formations qui sont membres du gouvernement, elles disent toutes il faut abattre le gouvernement. Et à quoi ça sert d'abattre le gouvernement ? Voilà des formations politiques qui non seulement ne sont d'accord sur rien, mais bien pire que ça, sont en guerre civile ouverte les unes avec les autres et en haine les unes avec les autres. Et elles se mettent ensemble pour abattre le gouvernement.
C'est un terme comme très fort.
Oui, entre LFI et le Rassemblement national, c'est quoi ? C'est de la guerre civile, y compris parfois dans l'hémicycle physique. Les députés des uns qui refusent d'accorder un regard ou de serrer la main aux députés des autres, même quand ce sont des des jeunes députés. Ce sont des formations qui sont hostiles aux racines les unes aux autres et qui vont s'allier pour abattre le gouvernement sur une question. Il y a pire dans la vie que d'être à la tête d'un gouvernement, que ce gouvernement rencontre des difficultés et qu'il soit renversé. Je vous assure qu'il y a beaucoup pire. La maladie d'un enfant, c'est bien pire. Le fait de se retrouver au chômage, c'est bien pire. Le fait
We're once again joined by Keith Vaz to discuss French politics in a bit more detail. Keith, France has been facing political instability over the past few years. What more can you tell us about François Bayrou and his possible no-confidence vote and the instability and unpopularity of the French president, Emmanuel Macron?
Look, French politics has not been unstable, actually, until President Macron decided to call an election. He had a workable majority last year, and instead of using that majority, he decided to dissolve Parliament to get a better mandate, and the result was he lost his majority in the French Assembly. So it very much is his fault when politicians feel that they need to bolster their position and actually end up in a position where they are not going to get a bigger majority. So from that point of view, it's very, very clear that he lost his majority. Looks as if the right and the left, uniquely in French politics, are going to get together in order to basically knock down the government of François Bayrou. And as a result of that, there's a possibility that Macron himself might believe that he cannot continue as president and call presidential elections. I think that's going to be unlikely. I don't think he's the kind of guy who necessarily gives up the presidency. So he will have to work with whoever the assembly decides is going to be the prime minister. And knowing the division in France, they may agree on getting rid of this particular prime minister, but there'll be no agreement on who the next prime minister is going to be.
Yes, Keith, do stay with us. We have more from France. Meanwhile, right-wing supporters of France's Les Républicains are speaking out ahead of the confidence vote in the National Assembly. At an autumn conference near Paris, members of the party have said that they would vote against the government and called for clearer and more decisive measures to promote savings. Let's listen in to what they had to say.
Moi, je voterai contre, c'est pas ça qu'on veut. Il faut des solutions beaucoup plus nettes et claires en faveur d'économie. Économie, comme nous on fait chez nous dans notre foyer. On fait des colonnes, ils ont qu'à faire des colonnes.
En toute sincérité, je ne la voterai pas. Parce que j'estime qu'en fin de compte, M. Macron, qui a sali les LR lorsqu'il a pris quand il a été président, d'accord, il a vraiment été, il nous a déchirés. En fin de compte, je ne vois pas pour quelle raison d'aller dans son gouvernement.
Bayrou? Ah ben sûrement pas. Mais qu'est-ce qu'il a fait ce monsieur? Moi, je vais lui donner un conseil. Qu'il remonte sur son tracteur et puis qu'il arrête de nous bouffer la vie comme il fait. Non mais c'est quoi ce monsieur? Qu'est-ce qu'il a fait là depuis qu'il est là? Alors, vous lui avez montré la sortie. Je crois que lundi, il s'en va lundi. Hein? Je crois. Bon voyage.
Je veux dire, si la gauche socialiste range à Matignon, moi, je n'ai pas de raison d'être contre. Parce que si les LR continuent à faire partie du gouvernement, je ne vois pas de raison de leur refuser. Voilà. Mais après, évidemment, s'ils commencent à avoir une ligne dure et contre les principes LR, dans ce cas-là, il faudrait les s'asseoir.
We are now joined once again by Keith Vaz to discuss this further. Keith, you were speaking about previously that the possibility that the left and the right might convene later on. What more can you tell us about the stability in French politics? Also the rise of right-wing politics in Paris What are your thoughts, Keith?
Well, Marianne Le Pen has been rising for several decades, both herself and her father, through their party. There's nothing that's going to stop that, and this is not about that. This is about the French president's inability to stick to the mandate that he was given, and as a result, you have other people calling the tune. The right and the left will come together. They will bring down the French government, and nothing is going to stop that happening. But they won't be able to agree on a successor. And that is the one thing that Macron has in his hands, the fact that they don't know who's going to be the next Prime Minister of France. It has massive implications for the rest of Europe, because France, along with Germany, are the driving forces behind the EU. It has massive implications for the United Kingdom. If there's no French government and nobody bothering about what's happening in Calais and watching the boats leaving France and coming to the UK, I'm afraid those are going to increase enormously. And the new Home Secretary and the new cabinet unveiled by Keir Starmer is not going to be very pleased about that. It's not going to please the German Chancellor. He's just had a meeting with the entire German cabinet and the French cabinet in France, in the south of France, the 25th such meeting over the years. And he is not going to be very pleased either. So this is not just about France. This is the central country that helps to govern Europe. And it's going to have catastrophic consequences if they can't get a government formed. So I think that Macron will have to use all those immense skills that he has, on the one hand, in chatting up European leaders, on the other, chatting up Donald Trump, all those great skills that Macron does possess. Very charming president. All that French charm will have to be used to get a new prime minister in place, supported by the left and the right. How he's going to do that and what names he has left to put before the French Assembly, I think all of us would like to see. But in the short term, it seems very certain that this government will fall.
Keith Vaz, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much for taking the time and for your insight. We now move over to the United States, where 8 key members of the OPEC Plus alliance have agreed to boost oil production again, a move seen by analysts as a bid to increase market share. The V8 group, comprising of Saudi Arabia, Russia, Iraq, the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Kazakhstan, Algeria and Oman, have announced that they will raise daily production by 137,000 barrels starting next month. Russia's energy minister Alexander Novak said Russia is fully compliant with the OPEC Plus deal, adding that the market is balanced and that they have agreed to monitor it further. He noted that the deal has been implemented at high level and that 7-month compliance remains high. OPEC Plus also confirmed in its meeting and it will be held on October the 5th, citing steady global economic outlook and healthy market fundamentals. We're now joined by David K. Johnson. He is an American author and he joins us live from Washington. Thank you very much, David, for joining us here on the program. David, why are these key OPEC Plus members boosting this output now at this very time?
Well, just to be clear, I'm in New York.
Apologies, David.
The reason you're seeing this boost in output is oil prices have been falling. And we are not at the state we were 10 or 15 years ago when old oil tankers were being held at anchor just to store oil. But the capacity to store oil is pretty quickly filling up around the world. And Iraq, which pushed this idea of increased production, depends on oil revenues for 90% of its income. It's like Russia, a one-note economy. So they are feeling squeezed financially. They're hoping to sell more oil. Their view is that they have more than enough oil reserves at current production for well past 100 years from now, when all of us will be gone. So they're thinking only about the short term. it would only take a very slight downturn in the world economy, which a lot of economists are pointing to as a likely outcome over the next 12 months, to end up in a situation where we've filled up the capacity to hold on to oil. Secondly, Iraq in particular has almost no capacity to refine oil. It sells crude oil, and perhaps a wiser strategy in Iraq would be to build oil refineries and capture the economic gains from refining.
Yes, and David, you mentioned it briefly, but production is rising by 137,000 barrels a day. What effect can consumers expect on oil prices?
That's actually a very small number, to be clear, and they've been talking about 500 million barrels a day. The leading oil producer in the U.S. is the United States at more than 13 million barrels a day. Every time Saudi Arabia, the second producer, puts out 10 barrels of oil, the U.S. puts out about 12 and a half, more than 12 barrels. And there's no shortage of oil in the ground around the world for at least a century. But the falling price, and oil prices have always been volatile and will likely be volatile until we've used up most of the underground reserves way in the future. They're going to continue to be volatile, and some of the OPEC countries are driven by, we want to spend more money, we need to spend more money, we have debts we need to service, we have a population we need to keep docile.
David K. Johnson, thank you much for that very brilliant, clear insight into that topic and for taking the time. We now move on and back over to Europe, where Russia launched its largest air raid yet, firing 805 drones and 13 missiles, with Ukraine shooting down the majority of them. Ukrainian Prime Minister Yulia Savdenko called the strike a symbolic blow to Kiev's well-defended center, stressing the urgent need for more arms and international support. Kiev residents are reacting to the Russian attack on the government headquarters as the city's main administration building was hit for the first time during the war. Let's take a listen in to some of the reactions of the residents.
Кожного дня ці атаки стають більш зухвалими, і те, що сьогодні потрапив уламок збитого шахеда чи там шахет в урядовий квартал, то це просто доказ того, що росіяни не збираються зупинятися. І так, це лякає, але більше лякає те, що потрапляють в жилі будинки, що тут.
Не здивований, бо вони б'ють куди тільки бачать. Я думаю, що посеред ночі там нікого не знаходилось з людей. Максимум охоронці. То вони, я думаю, були в укритті. Але якщо будуть посеред білого дня бити, то це вже будуть такі тривожні, дуже тривожні. Хоча воно і зараз тривожно, бо ми цілу ніч спали, цілу ніч чули ці вибухи і страшні були. Чекаємо, коли воно все закінчиться, а чим далі, тим збираються світові лідери, щось вирішують, але ми по факту бачимо, що нічого не міняється, наоборот, пофучується ситуація.
Може люди замисляться, що війна в країні, що не треба там займатися корупцією, чимось більше вкладати зусиль, грошей в сектор оборони і, напевно, буде менше тоді тих обстрілів.
Будуть обстрілювати, скільки буде у них можливостей. Тільки коли дадуть достатньо нам ракет і коли світ заставить Китай не купляти енергоносії, щоб не було коштів. А так нічого хорошого не буде.
Well, that is all that we have time for, but we will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world. Thank you for joining us.